Hi everybody, it's Senpai Fanfics back at it with another amazing content. What if Deku possessed Sentient Quirk? If you guys would like to see more videos like this in the future, hit the subscribe button and notifications on for more videos like this. Thank you to the creator of the fanfic, which will be linked below. Let's start it. People die so easily. When it's not right in front of you, it's easy to forget. But the reality is, people die all the time. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. Sometimes peacefully, sometimes painfully. Sometimes alone, sometimes with others. Sometimes people die, leaving friends or family behind. That last one, for me, is the worst way to go. To be left behind, and to leave others behind, that's the hardest thing about death, I think. Some are afraid of dying, some can't wait to die. But losing someone permanently is far scarier. And leaving someone behind to mourn losing you, that's almost as bad. There's a reason for this whole morbid rumination. Sorry if it's uncomfortable to think about. Fact of the matter is, I died. It was quick, maybe a bit of a cliché, but I'd rather my death be cliched than just watch a parent lose their child right before their eyes. It was a car. Don't know what the hell the driver was doing, I didn't get a good look. But it was just a kid, a boy, maybe 5 or 6, or maybe younger. It's hard for me to tell these things. He was young enough to not recognize just how dangerous the world could be, young enough to not have a reasonable amount of situational awareness. He was just a kid, all bright, cheery smiles and downy hair. All it takes is one moment of inattention, and the next thing you know, there's a kid trotting out into the street, with no clue of the danger he's running straight into, and the lights been green long enough for what little traffic there is to be barreling by at a brisk pace. Fast enough to kill a kid, no sweat. I see the car. The boy's mom and dad see it too, but they're stuck behind the horrified onlookers. I'm standing at the curb. It was the easiest dead sprint I'd broken into in my life. I got the kid out of harm's way. But I stumbled at the last second. My last second. I died fairly quickly, assuming I didn't wind up in a hospital on life support and stuck in a coma. My life wasn't great, but it could have been worse. I'd gotten to the point where I was just going through the motions, deliberately keeping everyone at arm's length in an effort to not form any attachments or meaningful connections. I'd outlived my parents, surprisingly. As far as the rest of my relatives were concerned, I may as well have dropped off the face of the earth with how little I kept in contact. I was probably a really bad day or two away from ending it all myself. I didn't want anyone to have to deal with that kind of baggage. At least the way I died made it so that the only thing I left behind wasn't just a mess to clean up. In exchange for my life, a family remained whole, and the family I bit the proverbial bullet for didn't know me from Adam. I was just a well-meaning stranger that happened to save their kid. Nothing much to mourn save for the idea of me, and most ideas eventually fade with time. That's fine with me, being forgotten. I wasn't all that memorable to begin with. Gods, I hope the poor kid didn't see me die, or what remained of me in the aftermath. The last thing I'd want is to leave him traumatized. Guess it's out of my hands. Now it's just, onward, to the next dream, I suppose. Bakugo Katsuki is like a little firecracker of a Pomeranian. With a Napoleon complex. And an impressive potty mouth for a kid with only 36 some odd months of living under his belt. Everything about him is loud and vibrant. The way he charges about full bore. The way he shouts out his dreams with all the assuredness of an individual who knows they'll see them fulfilled, come hell or high water. His obvious pride stemming from learning things faster than his peers and a competitive streak that stretches 10 million miles wide. His devil-may-care grins paired with an adventurous spirit clamoring to lead himself and any who care to follow to victory. I can't help but squirm a bit uncomfortably at the familiar parallels from my own childhood. His brash with the harsh language and pangshang for roughhousing he picked up from his mother Mitsuki, but it's not hard to tell he means well, just like his soft-spoken and easygoing father, Masaru. A bit lacking in tact, but that's the case for most children, so I think he can be excused. All of that and more makes it easy to tell just why Izuku admires Katsuki. I can't stop myself from wishing that Katsuki could avoid the pitfalls of hubris that I fell into when I was a kid. No such luck. When Katsuki's quirk manifests, I watch, practically helpless, as arrogance, helped along by all the praise heaped upon him by everyone else, sinks its claws into him and takes root without any pushback. Izuku's about 3 months away from turning 5 when he's diagnosed as quirkless. The doctor, Tsubasa, cites the toe joint as a deciding factor, and even after Izuku gets over his shock and protests that he has a voice that teaches him new words and how things work, the following scans and tests come up blank. According to the data, there is nothing abnormal about Izuku, save perhaps an overactive imagination. He's real, he insists through tears, his voice plaintive. Izuku, I murmur, poking gently at what I've dubbed as our link. It's okay. Their equipment can't detect me, I guess. That just means we have to figure it out on our own. All that matters is that I'm here for you, and you alone. They don't have to believe in me for me to be real. Izuku hiccups halfway through a sob and reluctantly settles with a subdued sniffle, shoulders slumping as he wipes at his eyes with his forearm. The train ride back to the apartment is tense and somber in equal measure. Inko is clearly at a loss for what to say or do. I can applaud her for not spouting any empty platitudes, rarely do they ever help anyone as much as intended, but I kind of wish she'd make more of an effort to comfort her son. This is a big deal, Izuku needs someone in his corner, especially if or when the rest of the world turns its back on him. Or turns against him. Back at the apartment, Inko doesn't say anything, her expression conflicted as she wrings her hands anxiously. She just watches as Izuku drags himself into the study, leaving the door ajar behind him. He pulls up his favorite video, and the recorded devastation gives way to familiar, and slightly obnoxious, laughter flying free from the speakers. It replays at least 23 times before Inko slips into the room, her presence made known by the faint shuffle of her feet across the floor. There is nothing vague or muted about the hurt and desperation that Izuku is feeling in this moment. Can I be a hero, too? He asks his mother, with pained tears streaming down his round cheeks and a smile as fragile as glass, trying not to shatter. When Inko sobs and pulls him into a hug, nothing but heartfelt apologies spill like poison from her lips for all the agony they inspire in Izuku. Izuku's anguished voice echoes feebly across our link, and it feels like my heart's breaking in the worst possible way. That's not it, Mom. What I wanted you to say was, you can, I assert firmly, shoving all the faith and encouragement and certitude I can muster into the link. Izuku's breath catches. You can, I repeat firmly. It won't be easy. You'll have to work harder than anyone else, fight fiercer, think smarter, keep going longer and farther. But if you want it that badly, and are willing to put forth the effort, then yes. I don't think Izuku is breathing, so focused is he on my words. You can be a hero. Feeling Izuku's hopelessness give way to elation, determination, and resolve, like the birth of a universe, is something I'll never forget. Just like in the anime I watched all those years ago, upon learning of Izuku's status as quirkless, the world turns its back on him. Even Katsuki, his best friend, starts belittling Izuku, calling him useless. Deku. Stop it, Izuku protests half-heartedly. He doesn't cry at the name, but it's a near thing. It hurts to realize that even his best friend won't believe in him, thinks him worthless without. I'll believe in you, Izuku. I'll always be here for you. I wish I could do more for you. I startle out of my doze when a sudden pain registers, and I curl into myself, smarting. My first thought is that Izuku bonked his nose on something in his sleep. Are you okay? I reflexively send across our link, but I get no response, only the muted fuzziness that I associate with a sleeping mind. Who? Weird. I decide to go back to sleep. A mental poke from Izuku disrupts the haze of sort of sleep I fall into when nothing requires my attention. There's a boy I don't know in my bed. Help. I immediately snap awake in alarm, reflexively going through the motion of blinking eyes open only to stare in bewilderment. Rather than seeing through Izuku's eyes like usual, I find him staring down at me. What? Who are you? Izuku whispers, eyes wide and curious. I blink, and it finally registers that it's me seeing me blinking. I sit up abruptly, startling a surprised sound from Izuku, and I realize I have a body, arms, legs, feet, hands. I reach up and run fingers over a mouth, a nose, eyes, eyebrows, hair, a face. I even have clothing, a familiar plain white t-shirt and midnight blue gym shorts, white socks and black sneakers that fits this new form I've taken. A giddy rush of disbelieving wonder bubbles up as it starts to sink in. We spend the rest of the day brainstorming together, trying to determine what I can and can't do. Although I'm ecstatic over having a voice again, I insist on holding the discussion over our mental link, if only to guide Izuku into the habit of keeping his mumblestorms in-house, so to speak. If I can make it so it's one less thing for others to hone in on and bully him for, I'll do it. At least it'll be one less thing for him to feel self-conscious or ashamed of. Which is unfair. Mumbling isn't something to be ashamed of. Thinking out loud can be a productive way to help work through and organize ideas. Speaking from experience. At least this way, rather than nipping a behavior in the bud, I'll just be redirecting it. But I digress. How is it? He asks. Completely different, I respond, watching in morbid fascination as my hand phases through Inko's ankle. She doesn't so much as twitch, blissfully oblivious as she hums and prepares a quaint lunch for 2. Or 3, seeing as Izuku eats enough for 2 people these days, though you wouldn't know it by looking at him. It really makes me wonder. How so? He asks, interrupting my thoughts and bringing my focus back to what's at hand. I'm passing right through her. It's like she's empty or missing something that you have. Some sort of energy or something? Why am I solid while everyone else isn't? Izuku asks, his blatant confusion coming across crystal clear along the link. How many senses does the average human have? I counter after some consideration. Izuku takes a moment to think, and I pull my hand back and step away from Inko. List them off one by one, I suggest. Sight, smell, taste, hearing. Izuku trails off, dawning comprehension replacing the confusion. And touch, I finish for him. There's also something that some refer to as the sixth sense, which could cover the subconscious or instinct, or something else entirely, but I don't know if there's an actual concrete definition for it. Regardless, I think this all ties back to you being the only one who can sense me, in all iterations of the word. Therefore, I can make contact with you, but no one else, seeing as they can't censor me. I meet up with Izuku back in his room and find him scribbling furiously in one of his school notebooks, repurposed for the sake of analyzing quirks. And heroes. Can't forget that. The link is practically buzzing with Izuku's theories and ideas, a cascade of information that takes me a moment to sift through. I hop up to sit on the edge of Izuku's bed, content to watch and chip in my own 2 cents worth or minor corrections every now and then. It's really something to watch a kid Izuku's age turn all the available pieces of an incomplete puzzle this way and that, and, through logic and reasoning with a dash of imagination, still manage to fit them together in a way that makes sense. He's got a long way to go from the sharp analyst I glimpsed in Boku no Hero Academia, but I can see the outline, the starting sketch, here in this moment. Oh? I prompt when he finishes his rambling. What have we observed so far? Izuku flips through the few pages he filled. The only thing you can directly interact with is me, he starts, finger tracing his own writing. You phase through other people, walls, even the ground, though the last you have to do on purpose. You can't fly or float, technically, when you walk across, sit on, or lean against something, you're actually floating just above by a really small amount. You can send thoughts to me and receive thoughts I send to you. I pick up on your emotional state most of the time, but especially when you feel something strongly, I add, which sends Izuku back to scrawling extra words into the margins. That's about all I have so far, Izuku admits a few minutes later. Okay, it's a start. What else do we need to test or know? Izuku bites his bottom lip thoughtfully. Is there a way to allow you to interact with anything else? How far can you go from me? What should we call you? Those are the main ones for now. I tilt my head curiously. What we call me? What, like a quirk name, or a name like yours? Izuku stops short, momentarily stumped by my inquiries, before shooting me an earnest look. Why not both? I raise my eyebrows in mild surprise. Well then. I guess we could come up with something, I propose tentatively. My mind wanders briefly to canon, which this obviously isn't, but I can't dismiss the possibility of overlaps. Assuming that Izuku might end up with one for all and getting dragged into the hole all for one fiasco. Well, I have just the name. For me as a quirk, anyway. How about Hitotsu Yuryuku with more than one? Izuku tilts his head to the side with his lips pursed in befuddlement. More than one? You mean to prove my existence at some point, right? I ask rhetorically. Once you do and register, well. It makes sense, right? It isn't just you. With me, we make more than one. It's vague enough to throw off enemies. Keep them on their toes wondering what there is more than one of. Plus, I think it'll be interesting. And it might come in handy later down the line, in case Izuku does end up receiving one for all and all the abilities included with it. I guess that would be good. He trails off, but he still seems somewhat undecided. He brightens abruptly. Oh, but what about more might? Rejected, I resolutely deny, my voice flat and face deadpan. Izuku looks betrayed. Sorry, but I refuse to have a name that sounds like Marmite, and I am in no way, shape, or form like All Might. But I hold up a hand to gesture for him to wait. He's an impressive hero, no denying that. But I'm my own sentience, and you're your own person. It's okay to admire and adopt traits you observe from others, but I suggest drawing the line at trying to be exactly the same. I'd rather I be like myself, and you be like Izuku. Izuku frowns, but I can tell from our link that he's changed gears from defensive to pensive. How do you know when you're adopting traits and not being like someone else? The question gives me pause, and it takes me a long moment to figure out a way to put it to words. You admire Bakugo, I state in a monotone, earning a startled blink from Izuku. Why? Kaken is amazing, he promptly answers. I close my eyes and pinch the bridge of my nose, praying to whatever gods may be for patience and restraint. Okay, but why do you think he's amazing? He's super cool, he's got an awesome quirk, he's good at everything he does, he's confident, and he'll be a great hero. Good, now I've got something to work with. Okay, I can agree that those are some of his good points, I say delicately. So out of all of those, what could you feasibly adopt and make your own? Izuku frowns. I can't make his quirk mine, that'd be mean, and impossible to boot. Oh, if you only knew. I take extra care to avoid projecting that thought and its complementary rabbit hole. Being confident? Izuku posits tentatively. Yeah, that could work, I nod in affirmation. But Bakugo shows his confidence in a number of ways. Will you start putting others down for being different or not as good as you? Izuku's eyes widen as he stares at me, aghast. No. But you want to be confident like Bakugo. How will you take and build up that confidence to suit you? Izuku bites his lip as he thinks. I could be loud? And say bad words? I arch an eyebrow at him. Do you want to do either of those? I ask, trying to keep my tone neutral and non-judgmental. Izuku grimaces. Not really, he admits, the link thrumming with his embarrassment and chagrin. Okay. And that's fine. What about how he doesn't let what anyone says deter him from his goals? How he rises to the challenge without wavering? Izuku's eyes light up. Yeah. That'd be nice. You could also be good at everything you set out to do, I comment offhand, and Izuku blinks. How? I grin wryly. Practice. Just because it might take you longer to learn some things doesn't automatically mean you can't get better. You can even practice exercising confidence. Izuku mulls that over, and I let him. I don't have to wait long for him. I think I know what you mean now, he admits, choosing his words carefully. I can be good at things and become confident like Kaken, but I do things in my own way. I'd still be me. I regard Izuku with a warm smile filled with pride, broadcasting my approval across our link. Exactly. I have a question, though. I nod at him encouragingly. What's Marmite? An awkward, fumbling explanation, a few searches on the net to fact-check, the rediscovery of YouTube, and some mostly random tangents is all it takes to introduce Izuku to the pre-Quirk era and many of its wonders and foibles. I'm not sure if this was a genius move or a mistake on my part. Eventually, we get around to the topic of picking out a name for me, which involves enlisting Inko for help with the kanji. Why are we looking for a name, Izuku? She asks as we scroll through sites specializing in baby names. Quick, what do I tell her? Izuku asks in a panic. I send him an incredulous look. I don't know, say it's for a pet rock, or something. It's for a pet rock, he parrots with a wobbly grin. As time passes, more observations about me courtesy of Izuku start piling up, growing from a little over 2 or 3 pages to nearly 10. To be fair, his writing's still fairly big, he hasn't quite figured out how to downsize to make the most of available space. For all that he is just a little over 5 years old, his hyper-focus is second to none, I'd wager. Once he's got something of interest on his mind, he won't stop trying to figure out as much about it as he can. We tentatively rule out the theory that I'm a ghost, and that more than one, as we've agreed to call it, allows him to see the unseen, though we're not 100% certain. We made a whole list of attributes associated with ghosts and other assorted preternatural phenomena, and everything, and subsequently debunked most, if not all of them. Salt does absolutely nothing to deter me, iron and silver don't seem to have any effect on me, much less harm or burn me. Furthermore, my presence does absolutely nothing to impair electronics. We also determine that my presence doesn't generate cold spots, and that I can't possess anyone or anything. Both of us have yet to find so much as a sign of other ghosts and the like, and we went so far as to take a risk and sneak out to a local cemetery at night once. Izuku proves that he has nerves of steel for a 5-year-old. Dark out? He pulls out a flashlight when it's safe to do so and continues on as cool as a cucumber. Eerie quiet of an empty graveyard? Possibility of running afoul of ghosts? He just grabs hold of my hand and keeps his head on a swivel, filling our link with quiet chatter, attentive, but not anxious. I prove that I make an excellent scout by finding a safe route that bypasses suspicious activity whilst remaining completely undetected. I put my foot down on encouraging more nighttime ventures, though, because while I'm happy you're feeling confident in my abilities, you need to get proper sleep, Izuku, and it would only take one missed hostile to get you kidnapped or killed. Thank the gods that Izuku is a fairly sensible child in that he heeds most, if not all, of my warnings and advice. At the very least he listens, and that's more than can be said for some of the other kids his age. I digress. So, maybe I'm not a ghost, surprisingly. But then what does that make me? Perhaps a sort of sentient quirk like Tokoyami's Dark Shadow? It's a possibility, but unlike Dark Shadow, I'm not exactly joined at the hip with Izuku. As far as we're aware, the only thing that really connects us is the shared mental link, and we've yet to find how far it can stretch before straining or reaching a limit. And I took a train all the way to Hosu. It was the only city I recognized off the top of my head, aside from Kamino, and I didn't feel like pushing my luck, Sumi, to test it while Izuku stayed home for the weekend instead of running around with Bakugo and company. I was able to keep him relatively entertained with mental pictures of the places of note in the area, and he'd return the favor by sending back mental images of aerial view maps of the city he looked up on the internet via the computer in the study, which went a long way in helping me navigate the unfamiliar territory. There was a bit of a delay between sending and receiving mental messages, though, both auditory and visual, due to the distance, probably. Also, we both got something akin to a bit of a tension headache after a while of exercising our visual back and forth. Audio thoughts didn't do much to exacerbate the headache, and after a while of radio silence, it faded entirely. As time passes, more observations about me courtesy of Izuku start piling up, growing from a little over 2 or 3 pages to nearly 10. To be fair, his writing's still fairly big, he hasn't quite figured out how to downsize to make the most of available space. For all that he is just a little over 5 years old, his hyper-focus is second to none, I'd wager. Once he's got something of interest on his mind, he won't stop trying to figure out as much about it as he can. We tentatively rule out the theory that I'm a ghost, and that more than one, as we've agreed to call it, allows him to see the unseen, though we're not 100% certain. We made a whole list of attributes associated with ghosts and other assorted preternatural phenomena, and everything, and subsequently debunked most, if not all of them. Salt does absolutely nothing to deter me, iron and silver don't seem to have any effect on me, much less harm or burn me. Furthermore, my presence does absolutely nothing to impair electronics. We also determine that my presence doesn't generate cold spots, and that I can't possess anyone or anything. Both of us have yet to find so much as a sign of other ghosts and the like, and we went so far as to take a risk and sneak out to a local cemetery at night once. Izuku proves that he has nerves of steel for a 5-year-old. Dark out? He pulls out a flashlight when it's safe to do so and continues on as cool as a cucumber. Eerie quiet of an empty graveyard? Possibility of running afoul of ghosts? He just grabs hold of my hand and keeps his head on a swivel, filling our link with quiet chatter, attentive, but not anxious. I prove that I make an excellent scout by finding a safe route that bypasses suspicious activity whilst remaining completely undetected. I put my foot down on encouraging more nighttime ventures, though, because while I'm happy you're feeling confident in my abilities, you need to get proper sleep, Izuku, and it would only take one missed hostile to get you kidnapped or killed. Thank the gods that Izuku is a fairly sensible child in that he heeds most, if not all, of my warnings and advice. At the very least he listens, and that's more than can be said for some of the other kids his age. I digress. So, maybe I'm not a ghost, surprisingly. But then what does that make me? Perhaps a sort of sentient quirk like Tokoyami's Dark Shadow? It's a possibility, but unlike Dark Shadow, I'm not exactly joined at the hip with Izuku. As far as we're aware, the only thing that really connects us is the shared mental link, and we've yet to find how far it can stretch before straining or reaching a limit. And I took a train all the way to Hosu. It was the only city I recognized off the top of my head, aside from Kamino, and I didn't feel like pushing my luck, Sumi, to test it while Izuku stayed home for the weekend instead of running around with Bakugo and company. I was able to keep him relatively entertained with mental pictures of the places of note in the area, and he'd return the favor by sending back mental images of aerial view maps of the city he looked up on the internet via the computer in the study, which went a long way in helping me navigate the unfamiliar territory. There was a bit of a delay between sending and receiving mental messages, though, both auditory and visual, due to the distance, probably. Also, we both got something akin to a bit of a tension headache after a while of exercising our visual back and forth. Audio thoughts didn't do much to exacerbate the headache, and after a while of radio silence, it faded entirely. Make a list of what you need to learn and a list of what you'd like to learn. I instruct, once again perched on the edge of his bed while he sits at his desk with a fresh notebook open in front of him and his completed homework set off to the side. It's fine if there's overlap. What he writes out boils down to this. Necessary skills: first aid, martial arts, self-defense, tracking, stealth, information gathering, parkour. Desired skills: first aid, gymnastics, acrobatics, hacking, stealth, martial arts, self-defense, long-distance running, making support items, ranged weapon handling. I look it over, nodding in approval at most, if not all, of his skill choices. Might want to add poker face, sign language, and misdirection to your lists, but aside from that, you've got a solid start to work with here. Very well thought out, I praise, grinning as I ruffle Izuku's messy hair. Izuku smiles and ducks his head, abashed and relieved in equal measures. What do we do next? Get started? No, not just yet. Some of these skills will likely require instruction from someone professional at most or licensed at the very least. Looking up tutorials and learning on your own only works up to a point with some of these. You wouldn't want to develop any bad habits that could endanger you or others somewhere down the line, right? Oh. Izuku's eyes are wide with alarm. Yeah, next step is doing some more research. There's a lot to consider when finding possible instructors. You'll need to keep their price ranges for instruction in mind. I'm pretty sure available funds are limited. I give him a long look. That's something you'll have to talk to Inko about. Izuku bites his lip nervously before nodding in understanding. Location's also important, especially if they're near or far away from home. Check if they have reviews, but take them with a grain of salt. Their policies are also a deciding factor. You don't want a quirkist asshole to turn you away, or even worse, accept you for the sole purpose of beating you black and blue, without providing instruction you've paid for. By now, Izuku is frantically scribbling the search criteria into his notebook while I wax poetic on the subject. I pause as an idea occurs to me, but immediately discard it. Even if I theoretically could sit in on sessions for martial arts or first aid without anyone being the wiser, there'd be no way to effectively practice what I learn that doesn't involve practicing on Izuku, which I literally can't and refuse to do unless it's a bona fide emergency, especially with no supervision to ensure I'm not doing something wrong. Plus, I think Izuku would object to the whole idea on principle. I shrug and move on. Oh well. We'll have to stick with what we find. In the meantime. And be sure to have multiple options for each field of instruction, just in case any of your first picks turn out to be incompatible. Having said my piece, I sit back and let Izuku do his thing, and before long, the familiar drone of his mumbling washes over me, thrumming through our mental link. Who? I wonder if I've picked up Izuku's habit of rambling. I startle awake in the middle of the night, the last traces of my nightmares leaving me panicked. The moments leading up to my death aren't exactly a rare feature in my dreams, but seeing Izuku's face superimposed over the kid I saved, and then over my face, that was as new as it was distressing. With it comes all the things I remember of Boku no Hero Academia, and how they could go horribly wrong. The sludge villain. The zero-pointer. Bakugu. Shigaraki. Numu. Sports Festival. Stain. Muscular. All for one. Overhaul. Everything after that and in between. I run a hand through my hair, fingers catching on long, straight strands that just keep growing longer as time passes with no means of cutting them. Izuku can touch me, but scissors pass straight through me. This is the longest I've ever let my hair grow out, and it's nearly down to my shoulders. Sometimes keeping the bangs out of my eyes is a chore and a half. Another point against the ghost theory, I'm growing as if I were still alive. Thankfully, the clothes I manifested with are just to match any growth spurts. I have a few sneaking suspicions about my hair, but I have yet to confirm anything concrete. It could be that I just ended up with Inko's straight hair rather than Izuku's tangle of curls. But that still doesn't explain the white coloring. Is it too much to hope for that it's just a throwback to one of her relatives? I cast a glance at Izuku, still asleep and blissfully ignorant of what this world could have in store for him. Sweet, selfless Izuku. I don't want him to get himself killed. If he insists on running recklessly to the aid of others, I'd better teach him how to be reckless within reason while I'm at it. If he wants to be a hero, he'll be a thoroughly prepared hero, damn it. One of the worst parts about this life is the inability to intervene on Izuku's behalf when his bullies come calling. All I can do is claw ineffectively at his abusers, my hands passing through them uselessly, my angry and frustrated cries falling on deaf ears, my voice heard only by Izuku. Just about as bad are the times when Izuku whispers to me through our link in the midst of his torment. It's okay, Yukuto, it's okay, he lies, even as his pain and anguish spill over to my side of the link. He is 8, still so young, and such a terrible liar, even without the link connecting us contradicting his words. This never fails to make me weep. Izuku, I have another activity that I think would serve as good practice for when you're a hero, I start hollowly. Izuku looks up at me from under his curly bangs, eyes red and face streaked with tears. His arms are wrapped tightly around his arched legs, and I can see the bruises darkening and the burns reddening the visible skin. There are probably more that I can't see hidden underneath his clothes. I grit my teeth at the familiar lance of pain that shoots through me at seeing him like this, laid so low. Take out a new notebook, and write down what happened earlier today. Only what happened. Not what you think happened, and this is important, Izuku, but what actually occurred and whatever was said, verbatim. Leave out any suppositions or presumptions, don't include any opinions. Keep it objective and factual. It takes a long while for Izuku to acknowledge the instruction, but I refuse to push him too much right now. I can wait for as long as Izuku needs to gather himself. Only once he's started writing do I continue. This is akin to something referred to as an incident report, which I'm sure you'll either have to write or fill out after every mission, patrol, encounter, all of the above, once you become a hero. It's a very important form of record keeping that holds both yourself and others accountable for any and all actions taken in the moment under scrutiny. I think you can add your suppositions at the very end, in a separate paragraph, but that's usually optional, I think. The main focus is to provide as neutral, clear, concise, and complete a recollection as you can provide. Will I have to share these? I hesitate at his feeble inquiry, before bowing my head. No, you don't have to share these if you don't want to. This is largely for practice, I guess. If that's the case, you'll likely have to hide them somewhere secure. He breathes a quiet sigh of relief and relaxes somewhat. I make a point of keeping my disappointment to myself. And this is important, Izuku. When you've completed the objective portion, take a moment and replace yourself with any other person, and if you absolutely have to, do so for whoever else is involved in the incident you've recorded, and consider if you witness something like that happening before you as a hero. And then ask yourself how you would react or respond. Izuku's pencil screeches to a halt in the middle of a sentence. Would you stand by and do nothing? Or would you take action? Regardless, ask yourself why. And if you think the event requires you as a hero to take action, then keep in mind the same should also apply to you, as you are now. You are deserving of respect and fair treatment. His hand clenches briefly before returning to writing. Days later, Izuku breaks his silence. I need some time and space to myself, Izuku's voice floats across our link, subdued. I stop short. This is the first time Izuku has requested something like this. That is willfully asked for solitude, beyond bathroom breaks and wardrobe changing, which he didn't have to ask for, as they should be a given, and outings geared toward scouting or wandering. But thinking objectively, something like this was bound to happen at some point. That doesn't stop me from wondering if I did something wrong. Old habits die hard, and not even dying can completely kill them off, apparently. Something in my throat draws painfully tight, making any attempt at spoken conversation nearly impossible. Just as well we have ways to communicate beyond speaking out loud. How long do you need? Is there anything you'd like me to do while I'm away? Can I have a hug before I go? His eyes widen and shortly after well with tears, and he rushes over to wrap my slim frame in a desperate hug, his voice babbling frantically across our link. I'm sorry, you don't have to, I can. Izuku! I cut in, tightening my arms around him enough to jar him from his distressed spiral. If space is something you need, I am more than willing to give it. The only thing I ask is that you take care of yourself as best you can when I'm not there to support you. Can you do that for me? I feel his nod against my shoulder and neck, where Izuku's head is practically buried. I reach a hand up and run it soothingly through his mess of verdant curls, careful not to snag or tangle my fingers in the thick, flyaway strands. I'll go and wander until you're ready. Just say the word, and I'll come running. It may take a while, but I'll always find my way back to you. Okay? Another nod, and he tightens his hug. I close my eyes and soak it in until he releases his hold and steps back. It's with a quiet wave that I leave Izuku's room, slip through the door to our apartment, and make my way down the stairs until I reach the building's ground floor. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I pick a direction and start walking. I don't know how I manage, but barely a week into my aimless wandering, I stumble across All Might in all his uninjured glory resolving a bank robbery. I am sorely tempted to send Izuku a few mental snapshots of the hero, but ultimately refrain. I can tell him all about it later, when he's ready. Besides, it's probably better to wait for Izuku to establish contact first, since he's the one who asked for space. With literally nothing better to do, I decide to follow the number one hero, to the best of my ability, seeing as I don't have super strength or agility at my disposal, while he's on duty. Better to learn how to resolve various situations from the best, I guess. I take care to steer clear of him when it looks like he's hanging up the metaphorical cape for the day. I shadow him day in and day out, all the way into the weekend. Damn, this dude puts both average and hardcore workaholics to shame, all the way to the outskirts of some derelict district, and then unwittingly right into a big confrontation between him and someone who I'm pretty sure is all for one. I'm left reflexively flinching and ducking for cover as what amounts to two titans in human skin clash viciously. Debris from abandoned buildings and uprooted trees and all manners of wreckage fly everywhere as the two maniacs throw devastating power around like it's fucking confetti. Their bloodlust and rage saturates the very air. My eyes struggle to keep up with the blows exchanged, and the snatches of taunts and snarls are drowned out by the destruction wrought between them. I don't know how I managed to hear it amidst the violent chaos. A quiet groan, just a few meters away. It has me freezing in place before slowly turning. There's a civilian, male, mid-20s maybe, with ears and hair the color of a soft mocha and the latter not unlike a lop-eared rabbit's, lying on the ground, pinned under a pile of rubble. A trickle of crimson slides sluggishly down his face, and the source of the injury appears to be a blooded rock barely a few feet away from his face. I'm running before I know it, and it's only when my hands pass through him that I remember that the things I distantly remember being possible for me are now beyond my abilities. No, 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 come on! I half sob, half snarl, frustrated tears welling in my eyes. The pile isn't that heavy, practically bits and pieces of gravel and fist-sized chunks of rock. It wouldn't be hard to drag the guy out if only I could just get a grip on them and pull. And suddenly it's like the world around me comes into sharper focus. A frigid gust carries dust with it, setting me shivering and wincing at the sharp sting as I'm pelted with the dirt. That no longer passes through me. I stare and rub dumbly at the stinging scrapes along my arms before snapping out of my confusion and shock. I reach down again and this time, my fingers grasp warm, solid skin. The relief overtakes the wonder and then makes way for determination as I struggle to pull the poor guy out of the rubble. Come on, I grunt as I finally haul him clear. My trembling arms attest to the sad fact that I can't hold up much of his dead weight for long. Get a hold of yourself, we need to get out of here. Another groan, and a flicker of eyelids. Wake up! We need to move. I bark a little louder, trying to be heard over the ruckus, resorting to pinching the back of one of the guy's hands since shaking him would make a potential concussion worse. Caramel brown eyes open sluggishly, irises two distinctly different sizes, definitely concussed, damn, only to blink frantically as another cloud of dust surges past us, leaving me hacking and coughing from a poorly timed inhale. It takes several long moments after my lungs have cleared for me to register that the earlier cacophony of battle has gone disconcertingly quiet. I shake my head to rid some of the dirt from my hair and glance around. My gaze flickers across the decimated field and notices first the brightly clad All Might. Why is he just standing there? His nemesis can easily hit him like this. All Might looks uncharacteristically worse for wear, riddled with cuts and bruises that other villains before this have tried and failed to inflict on him, and not for a lack of trying. Beyond that, he looks horrified, barely a step away from panic, really, his blue eyes wide and staring. His smile is nowhere to be seen. Following his gaze and turning, my eyes land on a man standing several meters away behind my charge and I, dressed in what could be considered incredibly rumpled business casual. Hitting the ground, or that minuscule space that exists as a weak barrier between the self and the flaws and obstacles on the physical plane, while on the imperceptible plane brings with it only a dull sort of pain, more a sudden sense of increased pressure than anything else. Through the onset of vertigo, I try to move, but I can only barely manage a brief twitch of the fingers of my right hand. Aizu, ku, my voice comes out shaky and frail. What? Why do I feel so weak? My Doria Shaunen. I hear All Might cry before he rushes past me to where Izuku's collapsed against a battered washing machine. What wrong? All Might, his voice breaks. I shudder. Oh gods, Izuku. Not even his bullies have ever been able to tear that plaintive a tone from him. Panic replaces my confusion. Every attempt at movement on my part proves futile. God damn it all, why can't I move? Something's wrong, I need to. Izuku's hurt, I need to. Midoriya Shounen, I need you to tell me what's happening. Are you in pain? I'm just so hungry, he whispers weakly as he averts his gaze. What? A faint wave of relief washes over me. Hunger. Something easily addressed, thank goodness. Have you been following the meal plan? All Might asks, tone worried and baffled in equal measure. Yeah. And we've both been doing the exercises. Wait. Izuku, I rasp. Is the meal plan for one person or two people? Once Izuku relays my question, All Might leans back in bewilderment. Everything on that packet is tailored for you, Midoriya Shounen. I groan as all of the instances revolving around Izuku's unusual appetite over the years resurface with a vengeance. If what's happening now is any indication, tell All Might that the portions are wrong for us, we both burn energy and draw from the same pool of resources, regardless of which plane either of us is on. The look of dawning horror that crosses All Might's face once Izuku explains the issue might have been funny if this whole matter wasn't so damn serious. We've been essentially starving ourselves. I'm quietly glad we discovered this weakness early on in a relatively safe environment rather than in the middle of any number of catastrophes down the line. Where is Yukuto Shounen? All Might inquires. Over there, Izuku directs, raising a shaking hand to point at where I presently lay. If you carry me over to him, I can grab him. All Might hurries to oblige, and once he's certain he has the both of us in tow, he bustles us off to the nearest diner and proceeds to treat Izuku to a hearty lunch. The waiter taking the order looks a little overwhelmed by the sheer amount of food requested for the two visible patrons at the table. Propped up against the booth we're seated at, I remain as still as I possibly can to conserve energy. While we wait for the food, All Might immediately lowers his head and claps his hands together in apology. I am so sorry, Midoriya Shounen, I didn't realize that your dietary needs weren't being met with the meal plan I assigned you. I'll start drawing up a new plan for the both of you by the end of the day. In the meantime, I'd like you to put all exercises on hold until I've made the necessary adjustments. Couldn't we just double the portions listed? I mumble. All Might shakes his head in negation after Izuku passes along my inquiry. You two aren't the same. You both sport different builds and likely have different needs regarding nutrition and fitness. That requires separate meal plans and exercises tailored to your individual affinities and development. Thank you all for watching this video. Check out the maker of the fanfic down below and goodbye. Izuku may have made a very slight miscalculation. Scratch that, he definitely miscalculated, and it is anything but slight. Flapping about like a flag caught up in a gale, Izuku clings desperately to All Might's leg, the flagpole in this scenario, and hopes to All Might that he doesn't end up falling. He will never live this down, will he? Yukuto's going to be pissed. He fights back his mortification and the urge to cover his face with both hands, kind of needs those to not fall to the ground, because that would mean he probably wouldn't live, period. Through eyes drying out from the harsh winds, Izuku sees when All Might realizes he has a passenger he wasn't accounting for. Young man! All Might exclaims, his favorite hero would never yelp, and reaches a large hand down to firmly grip the back of his school uniform. I'm sorry, All Might, I had a question I wanted to ask you, it's important, Izuku tries to say, but his words are garbled with the GS of their flight forcing his face into a shape that really isn't conducive to enunciating words properly. Shit, kid, I have no idea what you just said, but hang on, I'll find a somewhere to land. He swears in English, Izuku notes to himself, eagerly latching onto the distraction from his current situation and delighting over a bit of trivia that most people are probably not privy to. He's yanked up into a more secure carry moment before they alight on the roof of a building. A few breaths later, All Might gingerly lowers Izuku, and he shakily resumes his footing on solid roof. Ground. Concrete. I thought I was gonna die, Izuku wheezes out. All Might plants his hands on his hips and stares down at him. Young man. I don't think I need to explain why what you did just now was incredibly dangerous, do I? He arches a brow. Izuku cringes. No, sir, I know I shouldn't have done that. Won't happen again. All Might assesses him for several drawn-out seconds before coming to the conclusion that he means what he says. All right, the number one hero sighs, his shoulders drooping slightly. I believe you. So what on earth was so important you had to risk your life to say to me? Izuku takes in a deep breath and straightens, his backpack shifting slightly with the motion. Firming up his resolve, he blurts, "Can I be a hero even without a quirk?" His voice quavers even as he asks the question that's been weighing heavy on his mind since he learned that Yukuto was in danger. He curls his fingers into the fabric at the bottom of the outer jacket of his school uniform. Can someone like me be a hero like you? All Might's eyes widen faintly, but once the shock passes, his expression turns contemplative. Silence stretches between them, and Izuku holds his breath, hardly daring to breathe as he awaits All Might's verdict. Finally! It would depend on a lot of things, All Might decides, his voice slow as he searches for the words he needs. Being a hero is a risky job, no matter what you have up your sleeve, quirk or otherwise. Without one of your own, you'd need to make up for it with smarts and skills. But with appropriate preparation, I believe there is every possibility that you could be a hero. Izuku's breath catches in his throat at words that run eerily parallel to the ones that he's carried close to heart since that diagnosis all those years ago. Work harder than anyone else, fight fiercer, think smarter, keep going longer and farther, he echoes Yukuto's words. All Might blinks in surprise before nodding firmly in acknowledgement. Good, so you do understand. However, you will need to keep this in mind, he continues, raising a pointer finger to emphasize his line of thought. Your effectiveness will probably be limited compared to heroes who have quirks suited for the profession, so I can't guarantee that you'll make a top hero. However, I do not believe that would bar you from becoming a hero at all. His serious expression softens into something warmer. Because being a hero is about helping others in their time of need. Izuku doesn't know when the tears start leaking from his eyes, but he becomes more aware of them as his breath hitches before dissolving into heartfelt sobs of relief. They were wrong, Izuku can't help but think, the faces of all the people who looked down on him and insisted that he couldn't, flashing like a camera reel of the worst moments of his life through his mind's eye. There's no way a quirkless Deku like you could ever be a hero. I'm sorry, Izuku, I'm sorry. And then his thoughts turn to Yukuto's face, his supportive words and steady, unfaltering faith. He was right. You can be a hero. Thank you, he cries, curling into himself as he rubs at his eyes and the streams pouring from them. Thank you. These were words I needed to hear. I want you to promise me one thing, young man. If your heart is set on becoming a hero, promise you will be careful and smart, to do your best to live and in turn save as many lives as you can. Can you do that? Izuku immediately straightens out of his hunch, a few stray tears flying from his face with the motion. Yes. All Might's grin widens. Good. Now let's see about getting you down from this roof. He stretches a hand out. Izuku takes it, a smile of his own spreading across his tear-stained features. Izuku is left in a daze once All Might excuses himself and departs for the nearest police station. For lack of anything better to do, he starts meandering, just moving for the sake of moving, in the hopes it'll help him digest the enormity of everything that's happened today. Yagi Toshinori arrives outside the police station with a quietly relieved sigh, some of the tension in his frame leaking out now that he's moments away from handing the sludge villain he caught off to the relevant authorities. He absently reaches into his pockets for the bottles containing the villain, only to freeze when he discovers that said bottles are missing. Shit, he thinks eloquently, frantically trying to recall where and how he could have possibly lost track of the criminal. His thoughts screech to a halt when they are interrupted by the sound of distant explosions. He starts running before he can think. The sound of a commotion registers vaguely in Izuku's mind, and he starts moving to see what's going on out of habit. He reaches the edges of a gathered crowd and looks up. His heart stops when his eyes meet a familiar red, made all the stranger for the overwhelming terror saturating it. Why is the sludge villain here? Izuku's eyes flick frantically over the bedlam decorated with the desperate blasts of Bakugo's quirk. The wild explosions and the writhing sludge's wide warning strikes seem to discourage the assembled heroes from intervening. But still, why are the heroes just standing there? He starts running before he can think. Eyed by the clamor of deafening explosions, I turn a corner just in time to witness Izuku blinding the sludge villain with some uncapped highlighters. A bit risky, and definitely brutal, but effective. Good. The villain recoils with a pained bellow, the sewage blocking Bakugo's nose and mouth receding enough for the kid to gasp in a breath of precious air. That he fucking wastes on interrogating Izuku. Really? I surge forward, frantically trying to think of a way to get both boys to safety. Any moment now, the villain could start thrashing about and a stray hit could easily kill the boys while they're still in range. My eyes are light on Izuku, who has a hand buried elbow deep in the muck and is presently straining to pull Bakugo free. Bakugo slides out centimeter by centimeter, but at this rate, they'll both be flattened. Izuku isn't strong enough on his own. Just as well he isn't alone. I come up behind Izuku with a brief wordless warning through our link before wrapping my arms around his chest and start pulling with him. Please, let it be enough. After a moment fraught with tension, Bakugo slips free with an off-putting schluck. That has me reflexively grimacing even as Izuku drags him back and away. The villain's eyes are bloodshot and colored with a probably quite literally eye-searing orange and pink when he finally whirls on the two with a guttural snarl. Shit! Is about all I have time to think before a familiar head of golden hair appears between us and the sludge villain, blocking an enraged swipe with ease. All Might cocks a hand back in preparation for a punch, and I dig my heels in as best as I can while imperceptible. I brace Izuku, who then in turn braces Bakugo. I somehow manage to bolster the two teenagers against the cyclone whipped up by All Might's uppercut. The sludge villain doesn't stand a chance. Bits of muck splatter all over the heavily damaged shopping district, and an awed silence descends upon us. The skies darken, and rain starts to fall, drizzling down to dampen Izuku's clothes and hair. I remain unaffected, physically. Mentally, I'm just as impressed as everyone else here to bear witness to the phenomenon of All Might changing the weather with a single punch. A sigh shudders out of me, and I slump forward to press my forehead to Izuku's shoulder. That's the first hurdle cleared. The other heroes on scene hurry forward to look over Bakugo and Izuku, a mob of reporters and a handful of medics on their heels. I watch the scramble impassively. The majority of the reporters flock to All Might, with maybe one or two breaking off to focus on Bakugo, but the medics shoo the vultures away from the brat. Probably for the best. One hero starts gushing over Bakugo's powerful quirk and pitching an offer to make him a sidekick, which has me snorting. Fat chance of that. And for fuck's sake man, the kid almost died while you sat on your thumbs doing fuck all. Have some tact. I snap at the hero, uncaring of the knowledge that he won't hear a word I say. Izuku chokes on an inhale. Yukuto. Language. I arch an eyebrow at Izuku, unimpressed and still more than a bit frazzled from the preceding series of events. Izuku winces and wisely drops the issue, albeit a bit reluctantly. My gaze sharpens when Death Arms and Kamu Woods approach with stern expressions apparent on their visible features. I bristle when they skip over asking if Izuku's all right and jump straight into berating him. Oh hell no. Are your arms fucking decorations? If you're so butthurt over Izuku stepping in to handle things, why the fuck didn't you throw anything to stagger the perp and rescue Bakugo? I snarl, practically drowning out Death Arm's scolding. Izuku struggles to keep a straight face as I continue to take verbal potshots at the heroes who dare to berate him for doing their damn jobs for them. And then All Might intervenes. Hey! Death Arms and Kamu Woods and a few more gathered heroes go still and silent when they register All Might practically looming over them all, his trademark smile nowhere to be seen. While it is true that what this young man did was reckless, you cannot dismiss that his efforts were essential in buying that other boy one more breath, one more moment for someone to step in to save the day. He takes a deep breath. You chastise him for rushing in, but what were you doing as a child faced suffocation alone? None of us had a suitable quirk. A suitable quirk, All Might repeats, looking and sounding incredibly disappointed. The other heroes practically wilt under the weight of his disapproving stare. And yet this young man did just fine without using a quirk of his own. Are you saying none of you could have accomplished what he did? A stricken silence descends upon the chagrined group of heroes. Okay, I see your point, Izuku. All Might's now my second favorite hero, I mutter. Izuku shoots me an affronted glance. Second favorite? Who on earth is better than All Might? I huff. That'd be you, Izuku. But his reflexive protest cuts off as what I said sinks in. Izuku promptly hides his face behind his hands to cover his resulting blush and tears. His bright red ears, unfortunately, are a lost cause. Thankfully, the other heroes are too distracted by All Might to call him out on his lapse in composure. I snicker and gently pat him on the back. My gaze eventually returns to the number one hero, standing firm in defense of Izuku and his actions, and I can't help but marvel at the difference between what I once knew and what is taking place in this very moment. A part of me silently mourns for the worlds that never bore witness to such brilliance. Izuku and I slip away from all the hubbub once a medic on scene clears him. I pass through the gathered crowd without obstruction, while Izuku takes a little longer to slip mostly unobtrusively past and around the people gradually dispersing now that the excitement has died down. Once he catches up and draws even with me, I turn and start heading for the apartment, extending an arm out to drape over his shoulders. The gesture is meant to comfort him, but it's also for my own peace of mind, to just soak in his familiar warmth and reassure myself that he's really here and safe. Izuku leans into it gratefully and curls an arm of his own around my torso in a half-hug. We both ignore the puzzled looks of the people passing by, who eye me without actually seeing me. We just need a moment to collect ourselves. Surely we can allow ourselves this? A few minutes later, we carefully pull away, silently agreeing to resume the pretense of Izuku being quirkless. When the sound of approaching footsteps hitting the pavement in a rapid staccato reaches my ears, I turn to see Bakugo charging toward us. I scowl, readying myself to warn Izuku so he can flatten the ungrateful brat if things get violent. Deku! Bakugo barks out, his voice raspy from a combination of his earlier near suffocation and his full-on sprint from ground zero to here. Izuku faces Bakugo, his expression somewhat surprised but mostly guarded, even as the brat hunches over to catch his breath. When Bakugo gets his shit together, figuratively, that boy is a mess that is in dire need of anger management and therapy. He shoots a glare at Izuku. I focus less on the words and more on the tone and body language accompanying them, keeping a weather eye out for any hints of aggression threatening to get physical. Thankfully, he's all bark and no bite. Once he's spewed his bravado in the hopes of covering up his wounded pride, he turns on his heel and stalks off, his movements jerky and aggravated. I huff and shake my head. Better your questionable dignity than your death, Bakugo. Izuku merely shrugs philosophically, not expecting any different of his childhood friend turned bully. Bakugo has well and truly fallen from the pedestal Izuku crafted. Thank you all for watching this video. Check out the maker of the fanfic down below and goodbye.